what is likely to happen next in the future and anticipate the problems that may occur. And for that, you need information. And finally, you have a complex set of resources within cities that you have to manage. And that's how you can deliver better services. If you achieve this goal of delivering better services, modern services, through the use of more information, anticipation of problems, and coordinating your resources, you're taking the steps to become smarter. And that's a long process. It is a continuous evolution. It is not something that you buy and you put it in your city and you're suddenly smart. It's a process of transformation, of changes that has to happen over a long period of time, including a change in the culture, change in the governance, and change in the infrastructure of the city. I'm going to try to use all of these elements in the remaining part of my presentation today. There's another very important point I need to make, which is the long-term view versus the short-term view and how they have to interact. Traditionally, as urban planners, people are used to thinking about a long-term plan for the city. Sometimes they'd say, we have a decade-long plan. There's a master plan that can do the following things by the year 2020 or 2025. And that's a very, very important element of the evolution of a city. You have to have a plan. You have to have a goal. You have to have a vision to take the city forward. But at the same time, you are doing things every day in the short term. Every day you're making decisions. How do I manage the congestion that is going on in traffic? What about the crisis that happened because of some crime? What about the blackout in energy that we just had? Those are operational decisions that are happening every day, every couple of days. Sometimes you're planning for an event, maybe next week. And you have to think about how to maintain and operate the city on a daily basis. So the long-term plan gives you the framework within which you can make the short-term decisions. But the short-term decisions you make gives you very important feedback into how the city has to change in the future based upon the history of all of the day-to-day activities that you've had over many years. So there is this loop or circle between the long-term planning and the short-term operations that has to be highly connected. Otherwise, a city may not make the right kind of progress. I just want to compare some of the traditional ways of evolving cities versus the new ways or the smarter ways of evolving cities. I see this in cities around the world. For example, when there's too much traffic congestion, I see many cities simply investing a lot in developing more roads. But that may not be the smartest way to do things. It may be much smarter to figure out how to expand the existing infrastructure using better information. So for example, if you can understand the exact traffic patterns in the city, you may be able to dynamically change the direction of the lanes, the number of lanes. You may be able to dynamically change the traffic lights to manage the traffic much better. And that is a smarter application because for a small investment, for a very small investment, sometimes it's only 2% or 1% of the investment that is required for building very big, massive highways. For a small investment, you get better insight and therefore you can manage your existing infrastructure much better. The second point is cities think that urban planning is the answer to everything. But it's not in many cases, because sometimes urban planning makes assumptions that are not necessarily how the cities end up evolving. So it's important to have the right tools and techniques and processes for operationally managing cities on a day-to-day basis, which is equally important. And the third thing is to optimize departmental, instead of looking at a single department and optimizing everything that's happening in the single department, you get a lot of economies of scale and you get a lot more effectiveness when you get multiple departments working together. And I see some examples that has already happened here in Buenos Aires in all these three areas, which is a great way to start making progress towards being smart. This is a picture of all of the projects that IBM, my company, has been involved in over the last couple of years. We have more than 2,000 projects around the world. As you can see, there are many projects in North America, in Asia, several in Europe, and many evolving projects here in Latin America. I've given some numbers of the projects that we're doing in different cities, and I personally get engaged in many important projects that are going on in all of these countries, and I'm going to try to bring some experiences and examples of many of these cities as I present the rest of my presentation, to tell you what other cities are doing and what have they succeeded in and what have they not succeeded in. Cities are becoming smart today already, and some cities have been doing this for so long that they're seeing the effects of what they've done. So for example, in Stockholm, they implemented a congestion pricing system in the center of Stockholm a couple of years ago. Today, they already have a 20% reduction in the rate of congestion in the city. They also have secondary effects like improvement in the quality of air, improvement in the number of businesses that are, small businesses that are doing better business just because people are walking more, people are biking more, and improvement in the health of citizens because the air quality has improved and people are spending more time doing physical activity. That's a benefit that has already been realized. That's the kind of outcome we're talking about. Another example, in Richmond, in the United States, we have helped the police department reduce the crime rate by 40% over the last couple of years based upon advanced information technologies, because they're able to understand the patterns of crime, look at data from many departments, integrate it, and respond to crime very quickly, sometimes even anticipate what is going to happen. Lots of these outcomes are the reason why these projects are succeeding. And this is the reason why it makes sense to go in the direction of being a smarter city. It's all about the outcomes. It's not about the technology that you buy, it's about what is it that you're changing, what are the outcomes that you get because you're doing that. So those outcomes happen at many levels. And I want to talk about three specific levels. The first level is what I call instrumentation, which is all of the devices and sensors and technological gadgets that are required to gather information about a city. As I said, you need information about the city to manage it better. So how do you gather that information? You get devices like cameras. And I know here in Buenos Aires we have 2,000 or 3,000 cameras already on the streets. But there are many other kinds of cameras or sensors. There are traffic sensors, there are energy sensors, there are water sensors, all kinds of sensors, building sensors right here in this building. There's many sensors that can give you information about how much energy is being used, how much water is being used, what kind of crime is happening, how much traffic do I have, what the traffic is likely to be, etc. Once you have those devices, that's only step one. But there are two more steps after that you need to take. The second step is what I call integration, which is how do you use the data that you get from these devices? How do you integrate it? How do you get the right level of processes to understand the data, to make the right decisions, and to respond in an effective manner. And that requires the right process. It requires governance changes. It requires organizational changes, and it also requires integration of information from many places. That's level 2. Level 3 is what truly makes a city smart. The first level is more like the body of a person. But this third level, intelligence, is like the brain of the person. And without the brain, the body is not very useful. So the brain, where you have the intelligence, is where you get the true understanding or the insight, the analysis, and the predictive power for planning for what is likely to happen in the future. And that requires a tremendous amount of new approaches that will give you this understanding of all of the information that you already have. And only when you do that will you get all of the outcomes we're talking about, like the reduction in crime, reduction in congestion, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to give you a few examples of how these layers are being realized. And I see here in Buenos Aires, for sure, there's a lot of instrumentation that's already in place. The next step, just to make that very clear, is to get the integration and the intelligence. And that is, an ongoing process. So let me give you a few examples in several areas. First, let me talk about public safety. In public safety, I show at the top of this slide the outcomes that you're looking for. Outcomes are like reducing crime, improving the utilization of the resources, meaning the police officers and the cars and the fire trucks that you have in the city, or reducing the expenditure for operations, or improving emergency response time. Those are all the outcomes. Those are the things that your citizens care about. Those are the things that you care about. In order to get that, it's not enough just to have all of the sensors that you see at the bottom, the video cameras and the historical data and the police reports, weather data, and all of that you see at the bottom. What you need is the stuff in the middle, which is the integration and the intelligence. How do you get it together to understand what are the patterns of crime that are happening? And I show an example of video analytics on the left. In the middle, I show crime prediction. Video analytics can tell you, instead of having 2,000 people watching cameras, it can automatically tell you when something that is suspicious is happening somewhere. So, for example, if somebody leaves a big suitcase in the middle of a road, it can raise an alert to say to somebody, look, there's something suspicious over there, now watch that camera. Out of the 2,000 cameras, here is the camera that you should be watching, because that's where the suspicion is happening. Or if there's a person going in the opposite direction in a one-way street, it can detect it automatically and tell somebody that this is where you need to be focused on. Crime prediction that I talk about in the middle tells a police officer where to send the police personnel before an event actually happens. So what you see in that picture over there is a map of a city with many districts, and it's telling the police general to send more police officers to one district, which is shown in red, to send fewer officers to other districts which are shown in yellow, or to send almost no officers to districts that are shown in green, just because we know that given the time of day, given the weather, and given the historical pattern of crime that has happened in those areas, that in the next 24 hours, this is the pattern of crime that is likely to happen in the future.